Hi, thanks for joining me. I'm Jennifer with Sublimely Align, and today's video is going to teach you how to find a neutral pelvis, so the bony landmarks for a neutral pelvis, and then we're going to explore how pelvic position can impact your ability to recruit your glutes. So it's pretty popular in North American culture these days to desire a great booty, and a great booty can be an indication that you're using your glutes. However, even more important than this aesthetic, appropriate glute strength is integral to not only your hip health but your back health. So if you have hip pain, if you have low back pain, or if you just want a great booty, then this assessment video is for you. So let's just dive right in and get started. I am going to recommend that you find a mirror and do this in front of a mirror at some point, and you'll see why in a minute. So let's start by stacking our feet pelvic width apart, and we're going to have our feet pointing forward. There are 3 bony landmarks for neutral pelvis, and we'll start by finding the first 2 by walking the fingers around to the front of the pelvis, below the navel. Really kind of poke in there and find the 2 most prominent bones at the front of the pelvis. And these are often, but incorrectly, referred to as our hip bones. These are actually our anterior superior iliac spine, or our ASIS. And you want to check that our ASIS or your ASIS are level to each other. In other words, that one is not higher than the other. You also want to check that one is not out in front of the other. So the third and final bony landmark is the pubic symphysis, and this for neutral pelvis should stack directly below the ASIS when you're standing or sitting. And it's easier to see the orientation of the pubic symphysis relative to the ASIS if you're turned into a side profile, so let's do that. So you can see here that the pubic symphysis is stacked below the ASIS. It's not behind the ASIS, and it's not out in front of the ASIS. The other thing you can check for is pelvic rotation here. So you can just kind of watch my pelvis. You see a little bit of rotation, see the leg bone, or maybe more of the glute or hamstring. So you can see that a little bit better than when you're square to the mirror. We're going to do a simple hip extension movement, and I'm not going to give you a lot of instruction except to recommend that you be by a wall if you have any concerns with balance, because we are going to be standing on one leg. Find your neutral pelvis, and we're going to shift the weight over to one leg, pressing into the heel of that leg to hover the other foot off the ground, keeping the toes pointing forward and the pelvis neutral. We're going to take that leg behind us in space. You can see some glute work here. And you're going to just notice what range of motion you have with a neutral pelvis. Kind of like being in a cross-country ski track. And then you can stop that and return your weight back to center. We're going to do the very same thing, but this time you're going to bring the pubic bone in front of the ASIS. And again, you're going to shift the weight over to one leg, pressing into that heel of the standing leg to hover the other leg off the ground. Toe's going to stay pointing forward, and pubic bone is really going to magnetize forward. And then you're going to try and take that leg behind in space. And you're going to notice what sort of range of motion you have here relative to neutral pelvis, and you'll see that I have very little range of motion. So if you found that with the pubic bone forward in space you have the same range of motion, then what this tells you is that you were not doing hip extension. You were moving from some other joint, and it may have had the appearance of hip extension. There's a few things that some things that people do, and my go-to tends to be, instead of hip extension, I use lumbar extension. So I move from my low spine. If you have any back pain, you may want to check yourself and make sure that's not what you're doing when you're walking and other sort of glute activities or hip extension activities. The other thing that sometimes people do, and it may be one or a combination of these, is bend the knee a little bit. So that sort of gives the appearance of the legs behind you in space. Or turn the leg bone out in the socket to try and get a little more range, or perhaps even just a full rotation of the pelvis. And I just want to be very clear that all of these movements that I've just shown you are fantastic. You want to maintain your ability to move within all your joints within appropriate ranges of motion. But what you don't want to do is exchange your opportunity for hip extension and therefore glute development, appropriate hip strength, and movements like walking with lumbar extension. So go ahead, give this a try. Make sure you've tried it in front of a mirror and let me know how it goes. I would love to hear from you.